James and Lisa had been married for several years, a couple who, on the surface, seemed to have it all. James, at 36, was a hardworking man, dedicated to providing for his family and ensuring that their home was a place of comfort and security. Lisa, 2 years younger, was the social butterfly in their relationship. She was charming, with a magnetic personality that drew people to her effortlessly. Together, they were a picture-perfect couple. At least, that's what everyone else thought. Lately, however, things had begun to change. James noticed it first in the little things. Lisa's laughter seemed forced, her conversations with him shorter, and her attention often elsewhere. At first, he chalked it up to the stress of daily life. After all, they both had busy schedules, and the demands of work and social obligations could easily take a toll on anyone. But as the days turned into weeks, the distance between them grew more noticeable, and James couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The upcoming neighborhood birthday party was something Lisa had been unusually excited about. She talked about it incessantly, planning her outfit, discussing who would be there, and how much fun it would be. James, however, wasn't as enthused. He had a lot of work to catch up on, and didn't feel like mingling with the neighbors. But the more he thought about Lisa's excitement, the more uneasy he became. It wasn't like her to be so invested in a simple party. Was she trying to escape something at home? Or was there something, or someone, at the party that she was particularly eager to see? Unable to shake his doubts, James made a decision. He would go to the party, after all, but not to enjoy himself. He wanted to see for himself what was really going on with Lisa. The decision to attend the party came with a mix of apprehension and determination. James had always trusted Lisa. After all, they had built their lives together on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. But something about her recent behavior made him question whether that foundation was as solid as he once believed. The thought of spying on his wife felt wrong, almost as if he was betraying her trust. Yet, the nagging feeling in his gut told him that ignoring his suspicions would be a bigger mistake. As James prepared to leave for the party, he tried to convince himself that he was overreacting. Lisa had always been friendly and outgoing, especially with their neighbors. Tom and Nancy, in particular, had been close friends of theirs for years. They were the kind of couple who threw the best parties, always ensuring everyone had a good time. Maybe Lisa was just looking forward to a night of fun, a break from the routine. But deep down, James knew there was more to it. Lisa had left for the party earlier, wearing a dress that James hadn't seen before, something new, something she hadn't mentioned buying. She had looked stunning, but there was an edge to her excitement that didn't sit right with him. As she kissed him goodbye, there was a fleeting moment where their eyes met, and James could have sworn he saw a flicker of hesitation in her gaze. Or was it guilt? He couldn't be sure, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. As James drove to the party, he went over different scenarios in his mind. What if he found nothing unusual? What if Lisa was just having a good time, and he was the one overthinking everything? But what if he was right, and there was someone else occupying her thoughts? The possibilities were endless, and none of them provided him with any comfort. When he arrived at the party, the house was already buzzing with activity. Music played loudly, and laughter echoed from the open windows. James took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he might find. He wasn't here to confront Lisa. Not yet. He just wanted to observe, to understand what was really going on. As he stepped inside, he was immediately greeted by a wave of cheerful faces. The warmth and energy of the gathering should have been contagious. But James felt only a coldness settle in his chest. He scanned the room, searching for Lisa. When he finally spotted her, she was across the room, standing next to Tom. They were laughing, their heads close together, and James felt his stomach drop. The party was in full swing when James finally spotted Lisa. She was standing near the drinks table, deep in conversation with Tom, their neighbor. Tom was the kind of guy everyone liked, charismatic, funny, always the life of the party. He and Nancy had been a part of James and Lisa's social circle for years, but as James watched them together, something about their interaction felt off. Lisa was laughing, a light, carefree sound that James hadn't heard from her in a while. She seemed genuinely happy, but not in the way she was around him. Her body language was intimate, a tilt of the head, a playful touch on Tom's arm that sent alarm bells ringing in James's mind. He tried to shake it off. After all, they were just friends. But the more he watched, the harder it became to convince himself that there was nothing to worry about. James mingled with other guests, trying to distract himself, but his eyes kept drifting back to Lisa and Tom. They were still talking, now with their heads even closer together, their conversation seemingly more private. Every time Lisa laughed, James felt a pang of jealousy and hurt. He knew she was a naturally affectionate person, but this felt different, too familiar, too comfortable. As the night wore on, James's unease grew. He couldn't focus on any conversation he tried to engage in, his mind constantly replaying the image of Lisa and Tom together. He started noticing other small things, too. How they seemed to move through the party as a pair. How they shared little smiles and looks that no one else seemed to catch. It was like they were in their own world, and James was an outsider looking in. The more he watched, the more he started to question everything. Had Lisa and Tom always been this close, and he just never noticed? Or had something changed recently? James felt like he was going crazy, seeing things that weren't there. But every instinct he had told him that something was wrong. At one point, Lisa caught James's eye from across the room. She smiled at him, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile of acknowledgement, not of love or happiness. It was almost as if she was checking in on him, making sure he was still there, still oblivious. The thought made James's blood run cold. Was she hiding something from him? Was Tom in on it too? As the night continued, James's unease turned into suspicion. He started watching them more closely, waiting for a slip-up, a sign that his fears were justified. And then it happened. He saw Lisa and Tom exchange a look, brief, but filled with meaning. And then, as if by silent agreement, they both moved towards a hallway at the back of the house. James's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't want to follow them, didn't want to know what they were up to. But he had to. He couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his gut any longer. He needed to know the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. As James watched Lisa and Tom disappear down the hallway, his heart pounded in his chest. He stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing with possibilities. Maybe they were just getting some air, or maybe they needed to discuss something privately. But deep down, James knew that wasn't the case. The way they had been acting all night, the looks, the whispers, it all pointed to something more than just a friendly chat. James hesitated for only a moment before he quietly followed them. The party continued behind him, music and laughter filling the air, but to James, it all felt distant, like a background noise to the turmoil in his mind. He reached the end of the hallway, where a door was slightly ajar. The voices inside were low, but unmistakable. Tom and Lisa. Peering through the crack in the door, James saw them standing close together, their bodies almost touching. Lisa was speaking softly, her tone different from the one she used with him, more intimate, more vulnerable. Tom was leaning in, his face serious, as if they were discussing something deeply personal. The sight made James's stomach churn with a mixture of anger and fear. He strained to hear what they were saying, but their words were muffled. All he could catch were fragments. Lisa saying something about how things had changed. Tom reassuring her, telling her she deserved to be happy. James's heart sank as he realized what was happening. This wasn't just a friendly conversation. This was an emotional affair, if not something more. James felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. He wanted to burst into the room, to confront them, to demand answers. But he couldn't move. He was paralyzed by the shock of seeing his worst fears confirmed. The woman he loved, the woman he trusted, was on the verge of betraying him. And it was happening right before his eyes. As he stood there, watching, Lisa and Tom's conversation took a turn. Lisa looked up at Tom, her eyes filled with a mix of confusion and longing. She took a step closer, and for a moment, it looked like she might kiss him. James's heart raced, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He wanted to shout, to stop her, but his voice caught in his throat. Then, just as suddenly, Lisa pulled back. She shook her head, as if coming to her senses, and took a step away from Tom. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with realization. "No, Tom, I can't do this," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "This isn't right. I love James. I can't betray him like this." Tom looked at her, surprised, and perhaps a little disappointed. "Lisa, I just want you to be happy. If that means being with James, then—" But Lisa was already moving towards the door, her face a mask of guilt and regret. As she reached for the doorknob, James quickly stepped back, retreating into the shadows. He didn't want her to know he had seen. Not yet. He needed time to process what had just happened, to figure out what to do next. As Lisa hurried down the hallway, James felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over him. Relief that she hadn't gone through with it, anger that she had even considered it, and a deep, aching sadness that their marriage had come to this. He watched her go, feeling like a part of him was slipping away with her. James followed Lisa home, his mind a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness. He kept his distance, not wanting her to know he had seen everything. The walk back to their house felt surreal, as if he were moving through a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of what he had witnessed pressing down on him. When they reached their doorstep, Lisa fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking. James could see the turmoil in her eyes, the guilt written all over her face. She finally unlocked the door and stepped inside, not realizing that James had been right behind her the whole time. He waited a moment before following her in, closing the door softly behind him. Lisa was already in the living room, sitting on the couch with her head in her hands. She looked up when she heard him enter, her eyes widening in surprise and fear. "James, I didn't know you were coming to the party," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. James didn't respond right away. He stood there looking at her, trying to find the right words. He had so many questions, so much he wanted to say, but all he could feel was a deep, overwhelming sense of betrayal. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with hurt. "Lisa, we need to talk." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, her guilt evident in every line of her face. "I know, James. I'm so sorry. I don't even know where to start." James sat down across from her, keeping a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm that had formed between them. "Why, Lisa? Why did you do it? Was it something I did? Something I didn't do? I need to understand." Lisa shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's not you, James. It's me. I've been feeling lost, disconnected from everything. I thought maybe I could find something with Tom that I felt I was missing. But when it came down to it, I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't betray you like that." James felt a mix of relief and anger at her words. Relief that she hadn't crossed that final line, but anger that she had even considered it. "But you were ready to, Lisa. You were about to kiss him. You were ready to throw everything away for what? A moment of excitement. Something new." Lisa's sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking as she cried. "I don't know, James. I've been so confused, so lonely. I love you, but I felt like we've been drifting apart. I didn't know how to fix it, and I made a terrible mistake." James stood up, pacing the room as he tried to process everything. His heart ached with the weight of her words, with the realization that their marriage wasn't as strong as he had thought. "Do you love him, Lisa? Do you want to be with him instead of me?" Lisa looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "No, James, I don't love him. I never did. I was just looking for something to fill the emptiness I've been feeling. But I know now that I don't want to lose you. I want to fix this, to fix us, but I don't know how." James stopped pacing, turning to look at her. The pain in her eyes mirrored his own. And for the first time that night, he felt a glimmer of hope. But it was quickly overshadowed by the uncertainty of their future. I don't know if we can fix this, Lisa. I don't know if I can trust you again. Lisa nodded, wiping her tears with trembling hands. I understand, James, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I just need you to know that I'm sorry, and I love you. I don't want to lose you. James sighed, his heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. He wanted to believe her, to believe that they could work through this, but the wound was still too fresh, too raw. We'll take it one day at a time, Lisa, but things can't go back to the way they were. We need to talk, to really talk about what went wrong and how we're going to move forward. Lisa nodded again, her expression filled with determination and remorse. I'll do whatever it takes, James. I promise. James looked at her, his heart torn between love and hurt. He wanted to believe in her promise, but only time would tell if they could truly heal from this. Later that night, James lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The events of the night played over and over in his mind, each memory like a stab to his heart. He glanced over at Lisa, who was lying beside him, her back turned. As he lay there, James thought about their marriage, about all the years they had spent together. They had been through so much, good times and bad, and had always come out stronger. But this felt different. This wasn't just a rough patch or a misunderstanding. This was a betrayal of trust, a fundamental breach in their relationship that would take time, if not a lifetime, to heal. James knew that the road ahead would be difficult. They would need to have some hard conversations to confront the issues that had led them to this point. And even then, there were no guarantees. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild, and James wasn't sure if they could ever fully recover. But despite all of this, he wasn't ready to give up on their marriage. Not yet. Lisa had made a mistake, a terrible, hurtful mistake, but James knew that she was genuinely remorseful. She had stopped herself before crossing that final line, and that meant something. It meant that there was still a part of her that valued what they had, that wanted to fight for their relationship. And for that, James was willing to try. But as he lay there, the distance between them felt insurmountable. He knew it would take time, patience, and a lot of hard work to even begin to repair the damage. And there was always the chance that they wouldn't be able to. The future was uncertain, and that scared him. For now, though, they were still together. They hadn't given up on each other, and that was something. As long as they were both willing to try, there was hope. But it would be a long, difficult journey, and James wasn't sure if they would ever truly find their way back to each other. With a heavy heart, James closed his eyes, hoping that sleep would bring some respite from the pain. But even as he drifted off, the uncertainty of their future loomed over him, a shadow that would not easily be dispelled. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.